Hello, we're back again with continuing in our series of 5 P's of theological prolegomena. Our first 2 P's were primary source, in which we discovered that the Bible is the primary source for doing all sorts of theology and learning about God, which is something we probably already knew. We just didn't ever discuss it in that sort of depth. And our second P is one of priority, or the idea of theological triage. Today, our third P of the 5 P's is presupposition, dealing with our own assumptions. This is going to be the trickiest of our 5P lecture series, because one of the most difficult things for us to do is to deal with our assumptions. Sometimes we don't even realize we have assumptions. But one of the things that I will stress as we move through the concept of systematic theology is that we all have assumptions. We have assumptions about everything and all the time. And that's okay. It's okay that we have assumptions. It's okay that we have presuppositions. We just have to get used to the fact that we have them, and we need to become aware of what they are and learn them. And learn sometimes that we are acting out of our assumptions rather than out of what we have discovered to be theologically correct. Our assumptions play huge roles in our lives, and we can't get around that. It's just good to be self-critical and understand that those assumptions are present, and sometimes they drive our conclusions. And the sooner we understand that, the sooner we even embrace that, the better off we will be. Now, there are some assumptions that without which we could not do theology at all. Some really basic assumptions, things that we take for granted. But it's good to investigate the things we take for granted, because if we didn't, they could come back and get us later. And it's good to lay them on the table, put them up front right away. Some 4 really basic assumptions that we operate off of. And if we didn't have these, we couldn't even begin the theological task. Number 1, there is a God. If God didn't exist, we would be wasting our time. So we assume that he exists. We don't try to prove his existence, we assume it. To me, I believe that trying to prove God's existence is futile. And it's just as futile as trying to prove his non-existence. Neither one, in my opinion, are conclusively possible. So we're just going to operate with the assumption that he exists. Number 2, we're going to operate with the assumption that he has revealed himself, although that is subject to our limitations. He has revealed himself as much as we can receive. Now, he's probably revealed himself more than we can receive, but we don't know it because we have our limitations. We'll talk about those in an upcoming lecture series in one of our 5P's, personal limitations. But we have limitations, and his revelation is given to us subject to those limitations. A third assumption that we have to actually do theology is to assume that we are actually capable of understanding God truly. Now, we cannot understand him fully. We cannot comprehend him fully. We cannot take in everything that he is. But what we do take in can be real and can be true. That's an assumption we have to have, because otherwise it just becomes a game of speculation. If we believe that what we receive from God is only true for us but not true universally, then it's a private faith that can have no public fellowship. So we must believe that we can understand God at least in part, that we can receive at least in part, and that what we get in part is real and true. At least the possibility is there, and we aim to find it. Finally, we must assume that his revelation is not just a revelation for the sake of communication, but that his revelation requires a response from us. Not only does God reveal himself, he reveals himself to us so that we might respond. And because that response is required, that is part of why he reveals himself. Now, I think those 4 assumptions are very basic and very straightforward. And I don't think that there's any reason that we should doubt them. I think we should embrace them. They really are part and parcel of beginning the task of doing theology. Where we go next with this idea of assumption is, or presuppositions rather, is tricky. The basic ones we're okay with. The next level of presuppositions deals with things that are a lot more subjective. We bring other types of assumptions and presuppositions to the table. We bring our presuppositions about the Bible. We bring our presuppositions about truth. We bring our presuppositions about what God is like. We bring our presuppositions about who we are and why we're here. All of these presuppositions need to be fleshed out and understood over the course of studying systematic theology. And it is here that I am going to play one of my trump cards. I try to be as upfront and honest and explanatory about all that I do as I can. But here is a place where we need to go a little bit slower and a little bit deeper. One of the most difficult things for us to do as Christian thinkers, for us to do as theologians, is to arrive at what I call the heartbeat of God. What do I mean by that? I mean, what is God really like? If you read the Bible, you get a myriad of adjectives and explanations about God. From Genesis to Revelation, he's seen as being judgmental, merciful, loving, vengeful, powerful, repentant, and 100 other things rolled up in one. And sometimes it's easy for us to take one or more of these characteristics of God and begin there and build a theology from it. And these are what I call controlling presuppositions, or if you're dealing straight from Scripture, controlling hermeneutics. It's when you take 2 sides of truth and lay them side by side, as part A and part B. And when you take A and B and lay them side by side and say, I will understand B in terms of A then becomes a controlling hermeneutic. It becomes the one by which all other things are measured. If you're a carpenter and you've built anything, I'm a would-be amateur carpenter. I enjoy working with wood, but I'm not very good at it. But I know one of the main tools for carpentry is a square. And that square is the perfect 90-degree angle that shows that you have a perfect corner. And it's the rule by which all corners are measured. So then it becomes the control of what a square corner needs to look like. And far too often, we're not careful about how we utilize controlling presuppositions and controlling ideas about God and controlling hermeneutics. We accept something as control without fully examining why we should do so. Now, let me be very clear. All of the control possibilities are true. It's just that we may be starting from the wrong place. Now, I'm going to throw it out there for you now, and I'll, as we go through the course of all of systematic theology, I hope to show you why I believe it is true. But I believe that the controlling presupposition of all of Scripture is the oneness between God the Father and God the Son. That unity in the Godhead is the basic truth. That's not to say that it is it's true and everything else is false. I don't mean that at all. But what I mean by that is that all of the other characteristics and attributes of God, which we'll discuss in more detail when we get there, such as God's power and God's knowledge and God's judgment, just to name 3 off the top of my head, all of those need to be seen through the lens of the oneness between the Father and the Son. And if we try to comprehend judgment or power or knowledge apart from that oneness, we're going to wind up with a skewed theology that will take us astray at one point or another. And it is my firm conviction that it is these differences in controlling presuppositions or controlling hermeneutics that give us the main theological battles of today. I think that's where a lot of our theological wars come from. That we have somewhat arbitrarily chosen different controlling hermeneutics, different controlling presuppositions, and then carried them to their conclusions, building theologies around them without really examining in detail and in depth the method for choosing such controlling assumptions and presuppositions. Now, that's my opinion, but I have spent some time and spent some research in this area, and I believe that that is one of our flaws, especially in evangelical Protestantism, that we have just chosen a starting point without really examining why we choose it. And let me say that we will discuss more about this later, of course. It will come up again and again. But in the meantime, I think that the New Testament's witness to Jesus, especially given the prologue of the Gospel of John, the introduction to the letter of the Hebrews, the beginnings and endings of Paul's epistles, many of them, all point us to that unity of Father and Son, and that the Son is of the essence of the Father. To use later theological language building upon the biblical language. And I just cannot see any other reasonable way of beginning than the oneness of the Father and the Son. I think it's a safe place to start. I think it's a wise place to start. And we'll say more about why later. But I just want to, as we wind up this video clip, I just want to continue to hammer home the idea that assumptions, presuppositions are so very, very important. They are part and parcel of what we do. But they are also, for the average churchgoer, even maybe for your average pastor, they are the most unexamined part of our faith. The things that we take for granted. And as human beings, we learn by comparison. We learn and process new information by drawing comparisons to things we already know. We know that 1 + 1 is 2, therefore 1 + 2 is 3. We just take what we know and reapply it to add new knowledge to our library of understanding that we have inside each of our brains. And we don't examine how it all works. And this is one thing that I want to do in our approach to theology, is examine what we're doing. Look at our assumptions, look at our presuppositions, and try to understand which one really should be controlling. Now, I've tipped my hand and told you what I believe it is. It's that what the Nicene Council called the homoousion, the oneness between the Father and the Son. I think that is the one place we should start as Christians. But not all Christians start there. And those who do and those who don't wind up taking different paths on key issues down the road. We will keep that in mind as we move through them. But that's it for this clip. I just want to, again, stress the importance of presupposition. You cannot eliminate them. You have them. You have your assumptions. They don't go away with time. It's just good to know yourself, know what they are. And that way you can better address what you believe and why, because you understand what's undergirding it, not only philosophically, but just in an everyday, just in what you think every day. And I think it will help us and help us become better reflectors upon God when we understand what our assumptions really are. So next time we'll look at the fourth P of theological method, personal limitations. What are the things that limit us from being the best theologian we can be? Hope you're having a great week, and continue on with our next lecture coming up shortly. Thanks. Bye.